The anthem you just heard and the hymn, All Things Bright and Beautiful, was inspired by Psalm 104, which is a poem about God creating the world. Today we will read excerpts from that psalm. Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord, my God, you are very great. You are clothed with honor and majesty, wrapped in light as with a garment. You stretch out the heavens like a tent. You set the beams of your chambers on the waters. You make the clouds your chariot. You ride on the wings of the wind. You make the winds your messengers, fire and flame your ministers. You cause the grass to grow for the cattle and plants for people to cultivate, to bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the human heart, oil to make the face shine, and bread to strengthen the human heart. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. There is the sea, great and wide. Creeping things innumerable are there, living things both small and great. There go the ships and Leviathan that you formed to sport in it. These all look to you to give them their food in due season. When you give it to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. I will sing to the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have being. May God bless this reading to our understanding. One of the most exhilarating experiences of my life was the hike across Rocky Mountain National Park in Estes Park, Colorado. The scenery there, it's absolutely breathtaking. I was pretty young the first time I did this 18-mile one-way hike from Bear Lake to Grand Lake. We were out on the trail by 5:30 in the morning and scaled the mountain's biggest climb just in time to see the sunrise coming up over the craggy rocks of the mountain. When you get to the top, there's this section where the wildflowers are spread out like a carpet in a fairy tale. And once above the tree line, you hike for hours and hours on what feels like the top of the world. It's just stunning. It's majestic, awe-inspiring. There really are no words to describe how it fills your soul with wonder to be up there on the top of that mountain. It's like someone is pouring joy right into you. And then you begin the long, slow descent down the mountain. And at first, it feels like a bit of a relief to no longer be gaining altitude or climbing with the legs, but to just gently slope down. But after miles and miles and miles of switchbacks through the evergreens, you begin to tire, and at some point you think, well, now that was nice, but I could be done now. And then you look and you still have 6 more miles to go. I was coming down with a friend, and we were just going slowly, and we would periodically pause at one of the switchbacks and look out and see a pretty waterfall. And we still had at least 3 miles to go when I turned the corner and saw a really beautiful waterfall. And I said, look, a waterfall. And he said, you've seen one waterfall, you've seen them all. Let's keep going. I have laughed about that moment for years. You've seen one waterfall, you've seen them all. Let's keep going. Sometimes we can't really give credence to the glory of God that is surrounding us. I read recently that Ralph Waldo Emerson once asked what we would do if the stars only came out once every 1,000 years. What if we only had one chance in our life to glimpse the nighttime stars? Someone wrote in response to Emerson's query, well, no one would sleep that night, of course. The world would create new religions overnight. We would be so ecstatic, delirious, made rapturous by the glory of God. Instead, here's what happens. The stars come out every night, and we watch television. Today's psalm, Psalm 104, begins with the words, "Bless the Lord, O my soul," and it ends, Bless the Lord, O my soul. Psalm 103 also begins, bless the Lord, O my soul, and ends, bless the Lord, O my soul. Those are the only two psalms in all of the psalms that are bookended with that phrase. Now, the psalmist was writing this thousands of years ago, and apparently the psalmist thought that the people then, the ancients, needed to be nudged to pause and pay attention to the beauty and grandeur of God that was unfolding all around them. You and I mean, we live in a city of concrete. Some of us live in concrete high-rise buildings. Some of us live in homes with garages where we can pull in and drop the door, and we don't even have to feel the wind on our face or put our feet in the grass to feel nature in order to be in our homes. We live detached so much from the beauty of nature. But those ancients, they should have gotten it. They lived out under the stars. Maybe they had a home, but the door was always open. The windows didn't have any glass. They could feel the winds of God blowing through their homes. Or maybe they lived out in a tent and they really literally saw the stars every night, but they still needed the psalmist to remind them of the generosity of God's beauty, of the way God was lavishing them with the abundant gifts of creation. So we ancients and we moderns, we seem to have something in common. We can be ungrateful, sometimes even rebellious, but completely oblivious to God's creation unfolding for our joy and benefit. A classmate of mine has a new book out called Love's Braided Dance. And in that book, he talks about growing up on a farm in Alberta, Canada. He remembers all the days that he worked out on the farm with his grandfather. They would go together to feed the chickens. They would go together to tend to the recalcitrant livestock. His grandfather had come to Canada as an immigrant from Europe, where he had endured the atrocities of World War II. He knew that his grandfather had experienced unspeakable horror during the war, and he watched his grandfather move about the farm and realized that his grandfather wanted to relish life and to contribute to life. Quote, he understood that he had not created his own life or the lives of the creatures that nurtured him. They were to him as a sacred gift. Somehow, though, we humans seem to rush through life forgetting that every good and perfect gift comes from God. We rush past the waterfalls. We skip over the radiant night stars. A month or so ago, I heard an interview from a famous scientist named Francis Collins. Dr. Collins grew up in a home where no faith tradition was practiced. He said that when he entered medical school, he considered himself an atheist. And when he came out of medical school, he considered himself a Christian. You see, while he was tending to patients as a med student, he was assigned to this ward in the hospital where basically all the patients were on hospice. And he observed as he moved about tending to these patients who knew that death was coming soon, that those who had some kind of faith tradition seemed to be more at peace. And one day he stopped at the bedside of a woman who had a horrific heart condition, and she was praying. And when she finished her prayer, she turned to Dr. Collins and she said 4 words that changed his life. What do you believe? Well, he didn't know what he believed. And so he spent the next year or so studying religion, exploring what he did believe. And as a scientist, he was fascinated by quantum physics, and he thought that the best explanation to quantum physics was that there must be a creator. And he realized that that creator was also within him and gifting him with the gift of life all around him. And he said there were moments, especially when listening to music, when he felt lifted out of himself. It's a longer story of his journey to becoming a Christian, but what I heard in his story is that he discovered that life is an incredible gift. That's what I hear also in Psalm 104. God stretched out the heavens like a tent. God made wine to gladden the human heart. I'm thrilled about that line. God created small things, the yellow goldfinch, and large things, the gray humpback whale. God created the waterfalls and the sunrise shimmering on the crest of the continental divide. Psalm 104 says, God opens God's hands, and the people are filled with good things. What are the good things that you would say God opened God's hand and placed in your life? The scripture invites us to think about the things that are playful and delightful. It even uses the word play or sport in there. Here's what I think God created for me. Triple cream brie drizzled with honey. What a gift. I think for some of you, God created dark chocolate. God, I know, created fresh strawberries topped with whipped cream. You see, this God of ours is the God who dazzles us with pleasure instead of just making sure that we human beings and we animals have just enough calories to keep our bodies going. This is a God of whimsy and joy. But sometimes we forget. We forget that God gives the gifts. We think that I bought the triple cream brie at the store with my money that I earned. We start to think that what is ours is ours. Our country, our nation, our property, our land, our family, my stuff, my 401k, my home, my career, my education. The psalmist reminds us of a different reality, that everything is a gift from God's hand. God opens God's hand, and the people are filled with good things. God stretches out the heavens like a tent. God designs waterfalls. God creates everything. Everything. The Old Testament scholar James Mays says, the problem with you and I is that we imagine ourselves to be autonomous. We pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We take care of ourselves. We forget that we are utterly dependent on God's generosity. We see the world in fragments. Over here, that's the economy. Over there, that's the natural world. Over here, the world of the arts. Over here, family. Over here, faith. The beautiful psalm paints a picture of all of that as God's beautiful, lavish gift, freely given to all of us. A God who would stretch out the heavens like a tent and open God's hand to fill the people and all creatures on the earth with the goodness of life. When our son Connor was, I think, about 10 years old, we took him to a Saturday afternoon Royals baseball game. We were with a group of our friends. There were friends that had with them their 3-year-old son and friends that had with them their teenagers. It was a group of us. And I don't quite remember why, but when we got to the game, Connor had $50 in his pocket to buy a souvenir. And you know how it is. About halfway through the first inning, he needed to go to the gift shop. So he went to the gift shop. He came back and he told me what he had decided to purchase. He had decided to spend all 50 of those dollars on a toy for a 3-year-old boy that was with us in the group that day. I remember being so shocked. I wanted to tell him, no, that money is yours. You can't spend all of it on another child. That's for you to buy yourself a souvenir. But at the same time, I knew that his heart was exactly clear. That $50 was a pure gift, and his only wish was to gift it to another. Bless the Lord, O my soul. When we realize that all of life is a gift, we spontaneously rise up to share it with the people around us. We do it as an act of praise, as an act of joy. There are multiple ways to be givers in this life. You know this because you are incredible givers. Sometimes we give because we know it's just the right thing to do. Like when the girl next door comes over and knocks on the door and says she's selling Girl Scout cookies, but you just started a diet this morning. And so you only buy 5 boxes because it's the right thing to do. Other times, you give because you want to. You look around Kansas City and you see the people who are hungry and who are homeless, and you want to do something to help. And so you give extra money to the Easter offering to help the refugees, or extra money at the grocery store to help harvesters, or extra money to Habitat for Humanity to build homes for those who are unhoused. But there's a third way of giving, and that's the moment when you give because you absolutely have to. You have to because deep down in your soul, you are filled with the absolute joy of God's goodness, and it just flows out of you like a waterfall. It is spontaneous. It is the kind of giving that connects your soul to the very soul of God. I just wish we could remember. I just struggle to remember. How do we remember that God is the giver of every single gift? A few years after I hiked across Rocky Mountain National Park on that Across the Park hike, I decided to do it again. It was peer pressure. Our son Connor was old enough to do the hike with us. There was a big group from Christian Community Camp here at the church, all going on this hike. They told us that there was a new shorter route that was only 16 miles instead of 18 miles. And so we set off early in the morning. Again, we rejoiced at the majesty of God's tent as the sun rose on the mountain. But when we got to the very top, it was the windiest day ever. I mean, so windy, it was hard to walk. And we grew weary. We were miles behind the first part of that group. Our son was way up there, and we were way in the back. And finally, we began plodding down the mountain. And about 6 miles before we got to the bottom, my husband Dave slipped on a tiny spot of gravel and tore his quadricep, and he couldn't walk. And it was too late in the day. There would not be time for one of us to go and get a park ranger or a stretcher or any kind of medical help and get back before the sun went down. And so the group we were hiking with devised a plan. First, they thought they could make a seat with supplies in our backpacks and carry him down. And then they came up with a new strategy, and they surrounded my husband with these extravagant gifts of love. One of them said, "I'll carry your backpack along with mine all the way down." Another said, "I'll carry your hiking poles." Another said, "I will be your crutches. Just lean on your bad leg against my shoulder, and I will match your step all the way down the mountain." And there they went, inch by inch, mile by mile. They literally carried him to safety. Bless the Lord, O my soul.